It was a cold, quiet night when Daniel realized he had missed the last train home, and the city that usually buzzed with life had fallen strangely silent under flickering streetlights. When he checked his phone, it was 11:57 p.m., only 3 minutes before midnight. And the transit app showed just one option left: the last bus passing through the old part of the city. The bus stop stood on a forgotten corner with a rusted sign and an old bench that looked like it had been there for decades. Daniel had never noticed this stop before, but tonight it was his only way home. So he sat down and waited while the empty street stayed completely still. Exactly at midnight, headlights appeared in the distance and a bus slowly rolled toward the stop. Something about it felt strange because the bus looked much older than the ones normally used in the city. Its paint was faded, the lights inside flickered softly, and the route number on the front wasn't one Daniel had ever seen before. Still, it stopped in front of him and the door opened with a long hiss, and after a brief hesitation Daniel stepped inside. The bus was almost empty with only 3 passengers sitting far apart. A man in a dark coat staring silently out the window, an elderly woman holding a small suitcase in her lap, and a young girl near the back quietly humming. The driver said nothing when Daniel got on, and after he paid the fare the bus slowly started moving again. Daniel sat near the middle and looked out the window where the streets first looked normal with the same buildings and shops he passed every day. But after a few minutes things began to change because the streets started looking older. Some stores were dark and abandoned, neon lights were gone, and even the road markings looked faded as if time itself had quietly moved backward. Confused, Daniel checked his phone but there was no signal. When he looked up again, the man in the dark coat was still staring out the window without moving. And at that moment the elderly woman slowly turned toward Daniel with a quiet sadness in her eyes. "First time on this bus?" she asked softly. Daniel nodded. "Yes." The woman sighed quietly and said, "Everyone says that." Before Daniel could ask what she meant, the bus suddenly stopped, but there was no bus stop, only an empty street under a flickering lamp. The man in the dark coat stood up, walked to the door, and stepped outside without looking back while the bus continued moving through the silent streets. Soon Daniel noticed something even stranger because the city outside didn't just look older, it looked like it belonged to another time. Old cars lined the streets, buildings looked decades younger, and posters on the walls advertised movies from many years ago. "What is this place?" Daniel asked quietly. The elderly woman looked out the window before answering slowly, "This bus doesn't just travel through the city." "Then where does it go?" Daniel asked. She looked at him calmly and replied, "It travels through moments people never left behind." At that moment the young girl at the back stopped humming and spoke softly. "Everyone on this bus missed something important, and this bus gives them one more ride." A few minutes later the bus stopped in front of an old apartment building. The elderly woman stood up with her suitcase and said quietly, "This is my stop." Before leaving she looked back at Daniel and added, "Sometimes the last bus isn't taking you home. Sometimes it's taking you where you should have gone." The door closed behind her and the bus moved again, leaving only Daniel and the young girl inside. "Why am I here?" Daniel asked quietly. The girl pointed toward the window, and when Daniel looked outside his breath stopped. Because the street looked exactly like the neighborhood where he had grown up, except everything looked younger. The trees were smaller, the houses freshly painted, and under a streetlight stood a younger version of Daniel himself, a memory he had never forgotten. The bus slowly stopped as the girl looked at him and said softly, "You missed something that night." Daniel felt his chest tighten as the memory returned. It was the night his father had asked him to stay and talk. But Daniel had been too busy and left instead, and only a week later his father was gone forever. Daniel stared out the window where his younger self stood, about to walk away from that moment. Then the bus doors slowly opened. The girl spoke gently, "You still have time." Daniel's heart pounded as he slowly stood and stepped toward the open door. And for the first time in years he walked back toward the moment he once left behind while the bus quietly drove away into the night. Sometimes when the streets fall silent and the clock strikes midnight, a strange old bus appears for just a few minutes. And if you happen to be waiting at the right stop, you might get one last chance to return to the moment that changed everything. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below what kind of story you want to hear next. And remember, if you ever see a bus arrive exactly at midnight, think carefully before you step inside.